Okay. How you doing? So I've got a really long format video for you today. The other day, the reason why I'm making this, the other day I made a brief sort of analysis of the current state of the game for Destiny 2. I'm a long-term player, been playing it for a really long time, probably more than most, just in terms of in-game time. I'm coming up pretty close to about 4,000 hours now. I just checked. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna sit and chat for about 30 minutes. Me just kind of filling your ear, and in the background I've got some casual gameplay of the first story mission for Forsaken. I loaded it up, and I thought that was a good way to buy some time while we're just sitting here talking about Destiny 2, the overall sandbox, different assets in Destiny 2, character design, story arc, uh, economies, Eververse, sandbox a little bit, not too much. I don't really want to get caught up in that. But PvP, Gambit Prime, endgame pursuits, stuff like that. Okay, so first off, I want to very wholeheartedly point out that I'm a big fan of this game. I have 4,000 hours in it, or just about, uh, because I love it. It's one of those things that it's not just the game. The community behind Destiny is also extremely good. It's a very interesting community to be a part of because it's multifaceted, multicultural. There's a lot of different, really positive things that encompass the Destiny community as a whole, whether you be a streamer or a YouTuber, somebody that's into lore or PvP skill. It doesn't really matter. Everybody's welcome, and I think that that's one of those rare things that you have when it comes to a video game, or just anything in general, is to have the complete package of multifaceted skill sets and cultures and people that come together and make something really good. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do, or why you do it. For the most part, you're welcome in this community, and that is saying a lot. I think that that's something that is very rare, and I think that that's something that makes Destiny even more special. Okay. Now, on top of that, Destiny 2 is made by fantastic people. The world building is stellar, or interstellar if you want to be literal. Uh, Actually, no, it's not, because we never technically go. Well, I guess the Outer Realms we do go outside with the unknown space out of our solar system, but that's a topic for another day. But one of the things that's really cool is that not only is the community stellar, but the game itself is fantastic. So the world building, the environment, the lore, the character development, the character arc, the bad guy development, or the villainy, just the entire scope, the place that you fill in the universe, the aspiration that your character undergoes, the purpose behind your actions, and then on top of that, the ability to create something that's entirely your own, or to copy somebody else and be like, wow, that's really cool. Like to throw on different weapons or different exotics and play with different subclasses and to feel empowered. That is something that is fairly rare. Uh, and maybe it's not entirely rare to some people that are criticizing video games under a more scrutinous microscope, but for me, the way that you move and the way that you interact with the world and the way that you have this overarching variance to the experience that you can have from player to player. It's really only in Destiny that you have that whole complete encompassment of the player experience and story arc. And that's why I think Destiny is one of those games that's worth sitting down and talking about. And that's why I make videos for Destiny, and that's why I participate in the community for Destiny, not just because it's stellar and extremely welcoming and positive, but it's one of those games that's actually worth talking about and is doing a lot of things that continues to warrant being talked about, for the most part. So I've always been really astonished when I boot up Destiny, even as a 4,000 hour player. Technically, it's like 3,800 hours. I'm still blown away when I boot up Destiny 2. And on top of that, I just recently moved to PC, so that is definitely adding to that wow factor because the experience is completely different. So before I was on PC, I logged about 3,500 hours on console, where there's 30 frames per second. You play on a controller only. I mean, I guess technically you could use a mouse and keyboard, but the experience is much different than it is on PC. You really get to uncap player experience and the quality of the player experience when you play on PC. And it was a completely worthwhile investment to switch over to PC. It's something that I wanted to do for years, and when I did, it just opened up my love for the game even more. Um, and I'm glad that I made that decision, and I'm glad that I'm playing it, because now it feels like I'm playing an entirely different game, and I'm getting to experience what the developers intended to be experienced. And I feel that if you are on console, I know what it's like to play in a game where there's more potential elsewhere, believe me. But I think one of the cool things is that we're living in a day and an era where the rapid development of software and programming and new technology is affording us these new and unique experiences that we didn't get to have growing up. So the other thing that I'd like to talk about is that Destiny, in comparison to its predecessors and in comparison to other games in the market, I don't know what even to compare this to. I grew up playing like StarCraft and Brood War and Pokemon and all that kind of stuff. I'm a fairly old person when it comes to gaming, but not old enough to have grown up with like Pong, right? So, I grew up in the day and era when Pokemon Red and Blue was coming out in my childhood, and having watched the changes that video games have undergone in the last decade or the last 20 years, it's insane. And the fact that I get to play a game that's like Destiny 2, that has the same quality of Destiny 2, when I boot it up and I have this visual experience that's all encompassing with high fidelity audio and multi, I don't know, cultural connections across the world, and just all these multiple facets that make it so unique. It makes me just look back on my childhood and wonder how things got to this point. And that's one of those things that always keeps me very positive about playing this game. It's even if I'm not feeling like I'm playing well, because I am somebody that does critique the way that I play the game. I like to be good at the game. I like to have good things in the game. I like to work towards having goals in the game. And I like to do challenging things within the game as well. But one of the things that keeps me centered and keeps me relaxed and enjoying my time in the game is not overstressing it, because I'm still pretty much in shock and awe what I get to play on a regular basis. I know that it's not normal for somebody to have 4,000 hours to dedicate to a video game, but I have a very special circumstance, and for me, being able to afford the time and the investment into the hardware that allows me to experience this game the way that I get to experience it, it makes me very thankful that this game is what it is as well, right? Because if this game was anything less, then my experience wouldn't be the same. I don't think that I'd be as thankful, and I don't think I'd feel as content with the game, even if there are points of frustration with the game, because the overall experience is genuinely very positive. So when I'm doing this long format analysis of Destiny 2, I've got a 30-minute video talking about it. That is something that's always in the background for me when I'm making either criticisms, or if I'm analyzing the sandbox, or if I'm analyzing the way that the game plays, or if I'm looking at just the overall feel of the content. And that is never something that goes away. So I don't want to just sing the game praises for 30 minutes, because I don't think that that's, one, productive, or two, entertaining. for anybody that's listening, because there are a lot of other people that play the game and have different thoughts and viewpoints than I do. And I'd like to take a more analytical look at the sandbox, at the activities that we have, at the future of content, and the diversity of content that we have in the game as well. And in order to be really scrutinous, I have to put aside my preferential bias for the game just in general, and for that bias being adjusted by upgrading to a PC as well. So I have to be cognizant and aware that my perception is going to be different than somebody else's, and that's what I'm going to be trying to do. Okay? So I got all the niceties out of the way, and now we're going to go into a couple of different bullet points. And first we're going to be talking about story and the overall seasonal gameplay and character arc. Okay, so one of the things that I've really liked with the transition into the new seasonal pass is that each season has a theme to it, and attached to that theme is weapons and gear, and then now we're also getting kind of this updated system to Armor 2.0, which includes these new mods, which incorporates new builds, which makes different weapons and different loadouts function along different lines, and it allows you to play differently with your team in dynamic ways. And I like that a lot. I think that that's a very big asset for the overall longevity of playtime and for the depth and interest in the playtime as well. Do I think that it's a sustainable model? I don't think we should expect new builds every season, but I think this model does incorporate the addition of new weapon archetypes or new weapon mods or new assets each season in one degree or another. So maybe one season we're not going to be getting, new armor mods with a new seasonal armor theme, but we might be getting new weapon mods with a seasonal theme. And then on top of that, we also have the added depth of the seasonal artifact. And the seasonal artifact was a really good addition to the sandbox. I know that some people complain to some extent about the lack of power having any meaning and the power grind lacking any meaning. But I think that in general, the artifact having power and sustaining that kind of character advancement through power level is a good thing for the game, and it's a good thing for somebody that's either casual or hardcore. And if you're interested in pushing your power to the utmost upper limits that you can, then it's available for you to do that. I don't think, since all the seasonal content warrants doing that, that you need to focus on only power grinding all the time, and I think that that's also a good balance. I think that the Season of the Dawn, it had some activities in it that warranted being a highlight level, but not maxing out your light level as much as possible. And I like that there's a break between the power grind, because it makes really hardcore invested players that are logging in for huge amounts of time, it gives those players a break from having to push the envelope every single season, day after day after day after day after day. It's really important to have time off, and it's really important to pace out your investment, and it's really important to pace out the intensity of your grind if you're going to be doing it for a really long time. And you can apply that logic to any discipline anywhere, okay? You don't go, 100% in the gym every single day, all day. Right? Even the most hardcore workouts or whatever, there is some period of rest, or there is some incorporation of understanding that you're not going to be going 100% all the time. And it's the same here in video games as well. If you're sitting around, playing video games, and that sounds like a negative connotation, but if you are sitting around playing this game all the time, sometimes it's nice to have a break from having to try hard. And sometimes it's nice to take a break and just appreciate the game for what it is, and just enjoy your time without having to stress yourself to the point where you have to be the best in the game, or number one, or the first to do this, the first to do that, or to hit 1100 power for whatever reason it is that you feel like you need to. But that's that kind of talked about, and the overall story arc to me has been really good. I think the nice improvement that we've got with this new seasonal content is that we're kind of entering into stories, and we're having a more clearly defined transition of the story as we're moving through it. and I like that fluid dynamic. However, I will say that even though we have this now progressive story which is continuing, I liked, in its own way, the kind of pick up a story then drop it, pick up a story then drop it, pick up a story and then drop it kind of format that they previously had in other contents. And what that did is it gave you suspense and the lack of knowledge, and also it allowed for that thought of, I wonder what's going on with this story arc, to take place. With the linear storyline that we have now in the seasonal pass, it is going to be a more comprehensible and more up-to-date and more current and interesting story that will kind of keep players engaged with the game and with the progress. But the previous storytelling that they had in Destiny that Bungie was using, I liked as well. And I also liked that there was the lateral storytelling with what's it called? Not the Codex, the Grimoire. That's what it's called. I was thinking the Codex. But yeah, I think that the lateral storytelling through the Grimoire was also really impactful. The lore on weapons was also really interesting. There were a lot of different layers of depth to storytelling. And now that we have the Season Pass, we have a different form of storytelling, and I like it. I think it's a good direction. I think it's good for the game, and so long as it's sustainable for the people that are working on the game, the developers, then I am all for it. As far as gameplay goes with the seasonal artifacts and the seasonal content and so on and so forth, I think that this season was a perfect way to look at the surprise that can be generated from the amount of content or the way that it's delivered. So we had some seasonal stuff that came in, and then some seasonal secrets that came in that were just kind of like, oh wow, there's a lot more to the season than I really thought there was going to be, especially with the season and the depth of the storytelling that was accompanying it. And I was really pleasantly surprised with this season. I thought it was just kind of like, like nothing really going on, and then all of a sudden we're 3/4 of the way through the season, and it's like, wow, it's just now kind of coming to a close, and there's still something left. So I think that's a really nice way to push the content over a larger spread, right? So they're spreading the jam over the bread a lot more efficiently and evenly, and I really like that as a player I have more things going on that take me out of my rut or the normal things that I do, instead of just grinding hours and hours and hours of PvP. Sometimes I break it up by going and chasing the story beat or something like that. Now, I did just mention PvP, so I am going to transition to that. PvP, I think, has been one of those things. I've played a lot of PvP. Doesn't make me good, but I've played a lot of it. And I think the PvP in Destiny 2 is in a good spot, and you are more than welcome to disagree with me. But I like the pace of PvP in Destiny 2. I think it opens itself up for potential, and I think that the sandbox itself is fairly diverse, but at the same time there are a lot of items in the sandbox that really overshadow a lot of the other ones. Like, for instance, if you're using an auto rifle, you're probably at a disadvantage unless you're using, like, I don't know, just a really good auto rifle, something like Monte Carlo or Steel Feather Repeater, something like that, right? Your auto rifle has to be really good just to hang with the other things that are good in the sandbox. So I think that in terms of PvP, if you're looking at it from a really scrutinous lens, and the higher-ups in PvP, the players that are better than I am, will tell you that there are definitely some standout items, and there are. If you look at some of the weapons and exotics, there are some items and exotics that are clearly outperforming others in all levels of play, and it's one of those things that is going to happen whether you like it or not in any game, period. So I think that just comes down to the player being able to accept what items are clearly more balanced than, or clearly more powerful than others, right? Sooner or later, if you're going to play a game and commit time to a game, you will have to accept that there are just items in the game that are better, like it or not. How you would rebalance those items is not my job. But I would say that for the most part, since I don't play in the professional bracket, I'm just kind of like a middle of the ground player when it comes to PvP. Uh, I have a good time for the most part, and I enjoy the diversity of builds and items that I can take into the game with me. Now, transitioning into something like Gambit Prime, which has an element of PvP into it, but also the element of PvE as well, I would say that diversity of builds and flexibility of builds and the unique playstyles really lend itself more in Gambit Prime, and the potential for power in Gambit Prime is even higher in some ways. It's just less direct because you're not experiencing it firsthand in the player versus player, field. You're experiencing it inadvertently as your team is losing or winning. But I do like Gambit Prime, and I would like to see Bungie hold on to Gambit. I think it's an asset that does warrant investment into it. Gambit Prime is a game mode that I really enjoy, and I find myself enjoying it more and more. Even though I play a lot of PvP, I like the idea of playing Gambit Prime. I think it's a good form of competition. I like the way it's balanced for the most part. I think it's an interesting dynamic in the game. I think it has an interesting play to it. You're working as a team to cash in these resources to then, it's just got a really interesting flow. And if you take the pressure off of yourself as a player to be the best in the world or to be, the best on your team or something like that, you take the pressure out of it, and all of a sudden you get to see kind of Gambit Prime just as like a good game mode, and then there is also a level of competition that can be attached to it. And I think that for that, Gambit Prime is something that does warrant some investment into. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about was PvP, the competitive side of PvP, and then the addition of trials. And this is where I think PvP is trying to do too much. So PvP has casual, quick play, a bunch of different rotating playlists, and then it has competitive, and now it's adding trials. So what I think is kind of important for the game is diversity. And with trials in the game, we're not going to need competitive really, because there's no reason to play a ranked playlist if trials exists. And trials was always the original Destiny unique playlist where you went to go sweat. And outside of that, it was pretty casual for the most part. So why not drop competitive, right? Competitive, yeah, it did get a makeover recently, but if you dropped the investment into competitive and just put it into trials and then split the remaining resources or the developers into Gambit Prime, you could maintain that Gambit Prime unique playstyle, because that's another game mode that's unique to Destiny. You could invest into it a little bit more. You could revamp some of the armor sets, add more weapons, add more maps, things like that. Just touch it up a little bit more because you have more assets going into it, instead of trying to incorporate 9,000 different PvP elements from a sandbox and a community that largely just likes to meme about PvP in Destiny 2 anyways, and they like to meme about Gambit Prime too. But I think for the most part, if you're going to create an experience that's valuable to the larger variety of customers that you have, don't give up Gambit Prime. In fact, invest in Gambit Prime, and you're probably better off dropping the competitive side for trials and just allowing players to sweat in trials, because that's a more unique experience and that's a more Destiny-based experience that players will connect with on a realistic level. Because I don't think the competitive playlist has really hit its stride over the last 3 years compared to previous Bungie games like Halo. But I could be wrong about that. That's just my perspective, and I would like to see Gambit get a little bit more love, especially Gambit Prime. I don't like the base Gambit, but I do like Gambit Prime, and I think that would be an interesting way to go forward, especially if there is going to be trials. I just don't understand why you would need trials, competitive, and then Rumble as well, and then the rotator playlist, and then connection-based quick play, which seems to have more factors going into its matchmaking than anything else. So I just don't know why you'd need all those different PvP experiences when you have Gambit Prime, which hasn't had any updates for a while, and is a unique and multifaceted experience that is actually quite good. So as far as economies go in the game, this is completely separate. We're getting off of that kind of topic. Economies in the game, I think, are fine. Like resource accruement, the types of resource that you're getting. I think the introduction of the enhancement prisms, enhancement cores, and the ascendant shards was nice. I like in MMOs or large-scale multiplayer games when there is resources to hold on to and invest into your gear. I think that makes the game more interesting. So I like that direction. Eververse, this is always a topic of kind of concern for a lot of players. But I'm kind of content with where Eververse is. I know that there's a lot of stuff that is in Eververse that a lot of players would like to be in the game, you know, earnable items. But I think that I'm okay with paying for ornaments and things like that because it's a direct purchase. I like that at least I know what I'm paying for. I might be paying a little bit more for it, but it is high quality investment, so the ornaments that you're getting are very high quality, and I have a previous background in design and art, and I know that that work is expensive on your time and for your employees as well. So I am okay with Eververse being direct pay and for getting high quality items in the form of ornaments through Eververse. I would like to see more items be incorporated into earnable schemes, like through raids and stuff like that. That is always a motivator to play raids. I think that we should be incentivizing raids with raid ships, raid ghosts, raid sparrows, things like that. That's never going to be bad in this game. And with all of the items that we're getting in Eververse, I think some of them could be placed into the game just to be as earnable items, just to at least give a nod to the player that, hey, you don't have to pay for this one. It's good that you earned it. It's cool that you did the thing in the game, right? People like that. I like it. I think it's important to support your player base, and I think that the direct purchase is definitely a good model for that. And I don't mind paying for ornaments, but I would like to see like more items in the game that are earnable for players that do like to show off their triumphs. As far as sandbox tuning goes, I kind of talked about that a little bit with the PvP stuff. I am not going to be the one to say what is broken and what isn't, because I kind of think that Destiny is a game that has always had broken items in it, and the game is kind of boring when there isn't something that isn't broken or efficient, right? So something doesn't have to be broken to be efficient or good. And something doesn't have to be balanced to be interesting. But something doesn't necessarily have to be efficient or balanced, or efficient and interesting to be balanced, right? There can be multiple aspects of items that can be in the game and function within the game so long as they work with your build and work with your playstyle and all that. I think that there shouldn't be items in the game that are underperforming to the extent where they're just completely unusable comparison to other things, but there is always going to be a hierarchy of items, and I just don't really want to spend the time to think about how items can be rebalanced, because I don't really have any horses in this race. I use a lot of different weapons, a lot of weapons that aren't considered meta, and when I use the really strong and powerful items, I do think to myself, well, why do I use anything else? At the same time, I also make it a point to go out and use interesting items, and I also spend time farming out weapons with good rolls just because I enjoy that process. So I don't really particularly know what the answer is as far as sandbox balancing goes. I used to try and talk about that a little bit more because I was more involved in PvP, but I've gotten to the point where I just kind of don't care, and I know that there are good items, I know that there are powerful items, and I know that there are really powerful exotics and builds that go along with them, and the seasonal artifact also brings with it a whole new can of worms, but I've kind of gotten to the point where I don't care. And if there's something that sticks out to the point where you just can't deal with it, I mean, Lord of Wolves is pretty strong, right? Like, that's probably the biggest one on the list of things like, well, that one might be a little too strong. But I mean, outside of that, I kind of don't care, and I'm not even really that perturbed about Lord of Wolves either. So I'm all for having really powerful items in the game, and I am not the person to be telling you how to rebalance it in any way, shape, or form. I think that the sandbox tuning is difficult enough. Now, going forward from here, there's only been positive things coming out of the studio recently. I have a lot of very positive things to say about Destiny 2, whether it be just gameplay, quality of play, the experience in general. The patches have always been on point. The future content always looks bright. I'm always looking forward to the new raids. I'm always looking forward to new content. I'm always looking forward to new exotics. I'm always looking forward to new gear. I think that for the most part, the gear that comes out looks good, feels good, plays well. And I think that in the general scope and span of video games that are out on the market today, Destiny 2 is up there at the top in terms of quality and experience, and I keep investing my time because I enjoy it. You don't have to agree with me, that's fine, but I'm not going to stop playing because you disagree with me. Yeah, I am not afraid to say good things about this game because I enjoy it. I'm just not gonna buy into the hate train, and I think that I would like to see Bungie continue with their personal goals, with their personal brainchild, and I would love to see what they keep creating, because I think they've done a really good job so far, and they've met the community when the community needed them most, and they answered the call to fix the game that everybody loved when they needed to. And for that, I think you deserve a pat on the back. So that's my continued feedback. Thank you for watching and putting up with me, and I will see you in my next video. Good one.